Welcome to Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success podcast, providing business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs with the 3 INs: insights, inspirations, and intentional actions. Delivered through monologues and dialogues, we address topics like leadership, productivity, time management, work-life balance, and challenges like stress, conflict, mental health, and much more. Please do not hold back from suggesting specific topics and guests you would like on this podcast. Greetings and welcome to this episode. And this is one of those weeks where I have a guest on, and I know they are the episodes that you prefer. So without further ado, let's invite Patrick on here and get him to share a bit with us about who he is and what he's doing.
Thanks, Mikkel. Thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about myself. My name is Patrick Sherratt. I'm from Hawke's Bay. I grew up here from a farming family, and been overseas, come back, and essentially what I do is I teach ideas and tools based in high performance psychology. So, in terms of mental fitness, I teach thinking strategies that people can use both personally and professionally to improve their life and personal effectiveness. And I work in all kinds of industries. In the health industry, I work with health staff, work in councils, I work in schools, and really interested in teaching stress reduction as a way to help people improve their mental fitness. As the way that they see their life and cope with the challenges that they have. Just being able to give people ideas and tools to be able to help with those kind of things. So yeah, I'm based in Hawke's Bay. I have a company called Innovate. I'm married. I've got 3 kids, and live on an orchard with a lot of trees and a pretty crazy dog that loves to chase rabbits.
Thank you, Patrick, for that. And sounds like I have a colleague on here. So we are obviously both working in the field of mental fitness and being educators on that. And interesting to hear that you're working in the field of quite different to mine. So interesting to hear a bit more about that. And with that background, my guess is that you have learned a lot of the stuff that you're teaching in your own life and through your own life experiences, and have had some ups and downs along the way, like the rest of us, I assume. So I like to start these podcasts with stories, 2 stories, the 2 sides of the coin of mental fitness. One story where the mental fitness wasn't quite up to standard, and it ended you up in some not so pleasant situations. And then the other side of the coin is where you created some success, some achievements, despite it being difficult, but you had the mental fitness to do that. So I will let you decide what side of the coin you want to start on with this story.
Yeah, I think when I'm looking at sort of not having any mental fitness, that would take me back to my early childhood, really. As I said, I grew up on a farm, and uh, farming can be very difficult. I was the youngest of 3 children. My father was a farmer. My mother was an English immigrant who came to New Zealand when she was 19. And with farming, there's a lot of things that come outside of our control. So, you know, extreme weather events, droughts and floods and things like that. The farm was also holding a lot of debt. And so when I was about 12 years old, my father had a nervous breakdown and suffering from stress. And that was on and off for a number of years, all through my teen years. But what it did was it got me really interested in mental health and, as I say, stress reduction. And but it also took a toll on my own mental health. And so when I was about 17, I think my mother, my parents divorced, and I moved into town with my mother. And at that point, I think in terms of mental fitness, I just had nothing. I didn't know how to deal with the thoughts. I was really angry. I didn't know how to deal with the emotions that came through. And life became quite challenging. Wasn't a very nice person to be around, to be honest. I think with with relationships, they suffered, and my schoolwork suffered, and my grades suffered. And really, it was just this young kid trying to figure out the world when everything that he knew was gone. You know, growing up on an amazing farm, and then losing all of that, and then family splitting up. My older siblings were overseas, so at that point, it was really difficult time for a number of years, and my esteem level was so low that I didn't really care what I did. So the first thing that I did when I left school was working in a factory making tomato sauce. And I have to tell you, Mikhail, if you knew how tomato sauce was made, if people knew when it's made on bulk, you wouldn't want to eat it. I tell you what. And the big factory settings like that, and that's pretty tough. And then I ended up working in orchards for a number of years, and thinking, well, is this my life now? I had no clue that in terms of mental fitness, my thoughts, my attitudes, my beliefs really didn't really correlate to what was happening outside of me, and the decisions I was making and so on. I was just living my life by default. And a lot of that was given to me by my upbringing, which most of it was pretty good until I was about in my late teens. Yeah, really challenging time.
Mm. Thank you for that story, Patrick, and your openness about that. And um, what stood out for me there again is how many of us really are grown up with mental fitness? How many of us like have parents and an education system where we really learn about mental fitness and really learn about how do we handle ourselves, how do we handle our emotions, and in my experience, it's very rare. So you're not on your own on your own there
Mm,
in that sense. I think it's very common, and I mean, you can speak into that if you like with your experience of being out there because you work by the sound of it in the education system and with students. So you might see some of that. I would love to hear maybe a little bit about your experience of what do you see in terms of mental fitness in the students that you work with. But before that, I also really want to give you a thank you for the tomato sauce thing because I just don't eat that stuff. So I'm glad now to know why I don't eat that stuff. So so
yeah.
thank you for that. So back to the question.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think in order to teach, uh, or be a teacher, it's and an authentic teacher, you really have to know not only the content that you're teaching, but to feel it, like to have gone through those kind of hardships.
Mm,
And so I really enjoy working with young people and trying to help them realize the correlation between what they're thinking on the inside and what's showing up on the outside. For me, that first correlation really came in a light bulb moment. So after working in orchards and so on, and factories and orchards, I ended up really just having this thought, and I can remember it being in a hydroladder up high picking apples and thinking, what would I actually like to do for a job?
mm,
That was quite a profound thought, something that I'd actually like to do. So my esteem level was so low that I was just taking whatever, right? And so to actually choose what I'd like to do, and one of the things that I liked at high school was photography. And so I thought, well, I'll write to all the local photographers, and I did that, and I ended up getting a job a few months later with a guy called Peter Hallett. And he, in terms of mental fitness, he was right up there. And as a young man, just trying to learn from this guy, not only the profession of photography, and in those days it was darkroom technician, making prints
mm.
by hand, and big cameras, big medium format cameras and so on. It was amazing job. But he also taught me how to think, really, and become a lot more selective in how I think. And he introduced me to books. One of the first books I learned in this area was called Mind Power by John Kehoe, Kehoe. And this guy was talking about the use of your thinking, that your thoughts are a real force. They create. They want to create. That's the nature of thinking, is to create. And that when you're having a hard time, the moment you stop reacting to that stuff out there is the moment you can start to create. And so becoming very, very selective about what you think was a big message in what he was saying. He came to New Zealand and did a seminar tour, and my boss, Peter Hallett, took me to Michael Fowler Centre. And I can remember being in this huge auditorium with a single guy in the center of the stage talking about, visualization and affirmations and ways of being able to use your thoughts in much more specific and deliberate forms to be able to create success in your life. And it was an incredible moment. I don't think I got any sleep that night. I was so excited about this idea, you know. Um, and so I think that was the real start to a calling that I had to be able to want to teach this kind of stuff.
Mm.
And as you say, I do today, I work with young people in schools and teaching stress reduction. I also teach exam preparation, which is another part of my story. But being able to share these kind of ideas with young people is really, really satisfying.
And how old were you, Patrick, then when you had that experience you just talked about with?
Yeah, so I was about 20 by that point. And then what he also did was, Peter also introduced me to meditation.
Mm.
And I think that was also another turning point. So there was this kind of contrast between active thinking, which is the mind power stuff, but also the kind of allowing your thoughts just to simmer and to be able to access essentially another part of yourself, your higher self or your soul. And meditation helps with that. And so being able to not only sort of reduce stress, which is another aspect of it, being able to really connect in with sort of your own inner self and your inner guidance, and really allow that to show through in your activity was at the age of 20. That was
Mm.
I was very, very grateful to have that kind of experience and that kind of learning.
Mm.
Yeah.
Very, very early in your life. And I mean, this is
Mm.
the experience that a lot of people don't get too much later, you know. So kudos to you for getting there. And I mean, I would love to understand how come that you got all that so early, but maybe that's another conversation for another time. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know. So maybe our invitation to our audience is go and pick some apples, get up on those ladder, and as you're standing up there picking them, because I've done apple picking too here in New Zealand when I came to New Zealand in the early days. And I lasted a season and a half, and then I couldn't handle it any longer. I don't know how long you lasted,
Yeah.
but now maybe you're still picking apples now. Now you're living in an apple orchard by the sound of it.
Well, it's
Um,
kind of ironic that I live on an apple orchard, but that wasn't from my own doing. That was just from marrying a woman who grew up in horticulture industry. So yeah, it's kind of funny how that worked
That is
out.
a funny story.
Yeah.
And what stood out for me again in what you're sharing is that whether you were consciously looking for it or not, a mentor came into your life. And I think this is another really important thing in our lives for growing mental fitness and for really growing and learning is having mentors, whether it is mentors in business or mentors in photography that for you, but more importantly, life mentors. And I don't know how you manage to attract a mentor both professionally but also personally in one go. So uh, congratulations to you for
Yes, thank
doing
you.
that.
Yeah, it certainly had a profound effect in my life knowing this man, and at a time in my life when I was very kind of lost. I didn't really know
Mm.
um, where I was heading. Uh, what was also interesting After a period of years working with Peter Hallett, I decided I wanted to start up my own business. See, so again, that's that kind of active use of thought or mental fitness to believe in yourself. So building up your confidence and your self-esteem. These things are done by our self-talk. And so I became very much aware of what I was thinking and how my outer world was reflected by what I was thinking on the inside. And I thought I thought I really had it set and sorted. Yeah. So I went overseas. I sold everything I owned. At that point, I was actually engaged and had a house and had my life set up. And it's funny how life works sometimes because I ended up through my own personal development realizing actually the decisions I've made to this point of say now I'm sort of 20, in my early 20s um, were all based on my past, the attitudes and the beliefs in my upbringing given to me by default. But when I started to think about what I wanted for um, my life, I realized that what I was living at that point was not actually what I wanted, and I needed to go out into the world and travel and experience different ways of culture, traveling through places like Turkey and Greece and seeing completely different to what we would grow up in a little farming community in Hawke's Bay, that kind of idea. So it was great to be able to experience different ways of how people live. And again, the mental fitness around that of just being able to actually, when you're traveling, you have to allow life to unfold through
Mm,
you. You
mm,
know, you think you're in control, but then, the bus doesn't show up. And you're like, and you're in the middle of the night and you're tired and hungry and you can't, all of that sort of stuff. So it was very much a process
mm,
of backpacking was really much about letting life
mm,
unfold through you
mm,
as opposed to you trying to create your life,
mm,
which was what I was these books were telling me, it's all about, you create your reality, 100% reality. But there's also something else going on here,
mm,
which maybe sort of rests in more spiritual realms, which is kind of interesting to consider, and
mm,
philosophical realms. I ended up coming back from overseas completely broke and brokenhearted. I was just a mess. And I think in a lot of philosophy, they talk about this thing called the dark night of the soul, which is really where all your life of everything that you have built up until that point just gets disintegrated. And I can remember being uh I'd come back to New Zealand and I was at the beach and I just, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And I was the lowest of the low. And I was standing, I thought I'd go for a swim. And I thought, you know what? I could just keep going, like I could choose right now just to die, like in my life. That's it. Um, and this voice inside of me just said, well, you can choose to start dying, or you can choose to start living. It's really is your choice.
mm,
And at that sort of really, really low point, and that was by this time I was 28, late 20s, I thought, you know what? I think I need to get back on the horse, so to speak, and really um, use everything that I learned up until that point to actually create a life that I wanted, but in New Zealand. And so I went back to school. That was the first thing I knew I had to do was I needed to educate myself, and I knew my calling was to teach personal development. Like I'd seen this guy John Kehoe and the Michael Fowler Center, but in order to be able to get to that kind of level, I needed to have formal qualifications. So I had done a lot of personal development courses already, but they were kind of holistic in the sense, I'd done meditation courses. I'd done body-centered workshops like Tai Chi and therapeutic massage. And I even did psychic development, firewalking, Native American sweat lodge. It was kind of like everything was in there. And I seem to remember I might have done a workshop or two with you, Mikkel, along the way. Yeah.
I think so. Back in the very early days when I just arrived back in Hawke's Bay, the firewalking and all of that.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
hmm. So it's like
Um,
most people have to wait till they get to the midlife to have the midlife crisis. Like you had a quarter life crisis like
yes.
earlier in your life, and again, congratulations to you for having it earlier rather than to wait till later. So you got more time, and I've had it quite a long time now already to make quite an impact in the world. And traveling also, thank you for mentioning that. I did a lot of traveling, and when you said about the bus not showing up in the middle of Mali, which is in the middle of Africa, in the middle of the night, and the bus was 20 hours late, and you just lie down and with everybody else and just sleep on the ground, and again, it's you're not in control, and I learned a lot from the traveling like you did. So that's awesome, Patrick. Tell us a story from I mean, y- your story so far is both including times when you didn't have the mental fitness and it got really dark and difficult and challenging and walking into the ocean going, well, I could just keep walking. And also a lot of the things you did, like going traveling and getting into photography and learning all these things, also require for you to have a certain level of mental fitness to be able to do that. So you're kind of telling stories from both sides of the coin already. Um, Maybe if you can tell us a story more related to like stepping into business and you running your or starting or running your own businesses along the way, where you created some success within that, which I know you have, and you created it not because it was easy, but you created it because it was difficult, but you had the mental fitness to actually create that success. Can you think of a story or two along those lines?
I would go back to the um, the need to get formal qualifications to start with. So I had to go back to school. I knew that in order to work in businesses and organizations, as I'm doing now in hospitals, and councils, and schools, really trying to serve in what I teach, the the way to get into those organizations is you need to have formal qualifications. So I did a psychology degree, and I can remember sitting the first few weeks in class again. And at high school, I wasn't very academic, and I didn't, because of the sort of turmoil of my family life, I wasn't really engaged, and so I didn't get very good grades. But that was at 18. I took a 10-year, 17, 18. I took a 10-year gap year. They call it a gap year in New Zealand. I took a gap decade. I went back to school and now I'm 28 and I'm sitting there and I'm going, what the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. But I just persevered and I learned how to learn and how to study for exams. And I got actually really interested in that. And I ended up writing books about it and doing seminars in it in high schools and teaching young people how to prepare for exams because we weren't taught that at high school. So it was quite a challenge to be able to work through getting a psychology degree. And then I thought, well, why not carry on? And so I ended up doing a master's in education. And I was getting great results. And I realized, well, maybe I wasn't as dumb as I thought I was at high school. Maybe I had this academic potential. I just couldn't see it. And as soon as I wanted to be there, boom, the brain switches on. I've got purpose. I need these qualifications to do my calling, which is to teach essentially personal development and stress reduction. Uh, and so, to be able to do that, I needed these qualifications. So it was like 15 years of hard slog working through trying to get these qualifications. And at the same time, having a life. So I got married and ended up having a stepson and then two more children of my own. and learning to parent. And in terms of parenting, that's a whole personal development journey right there. Learning all
Sure
the
is.
ages and stages of life, and giving of yourself to the development of other people as a parent is phenomenal experience for me. I love parenting. Um, and then coming back to business, as you suggested, the through all of that, as I started to teach, I ended up teaching at the local polytechnic as a starting place. And remember, the very first time I'm standing in front of people, not now I'm not a student, I'm actually a teacher, being so nervous, And again, confidence is not there yet because I haven't got the experience, but this little voice inside my head again said, just stay in that, and keep practicing essentially. So I ended up spending a number of years working at EIT in Hawke's Bay as a tutor, a communications tutor. And then the strangest thing happened while I was working part-time. I was still studying, doing my master's. I got this, I found this audio cassette tape in my attic, which was part of a box of books and tapes, which actually belonged to a friend of mine who had passed away a few years earlier, and he'd bequeathed me all of this stuff. He knew he was dying, and he said, "Oh, you can have all my books and tapes and so on." It was all personal development stuff. And I put it in my attic, didn't really think about it. One day I took out this old audio cassette tape, and it was called Traits of High Performing People by a man named Lou Tice. And I was listening to this tape, in the car kind of thing, driving along and whenever I could. And the content on it was exactly what I wanted to teach. So I'm teaching communications at Polytech, building my skills there. But I discovered this curriculum by an organization called the Pacific Institute in the US, and they also have an office in Australia. And I thought, this is it. This is what I want to teach. And so I contacted the organization, and long story short, I basically ended up becoming the New Zealand um, what's the word, base for this American company and teaching their curriculum. And I ended up teaming up with another man, a guy called Ian Richards, who was from the UK. He'd done some work with the Pacific Institute in the UK, so it's an international organization. And he'd moved to New Zealand, and the two of us set up the Pacific Institute in New Zealand. So I'm still working at EIT, and I'm setting up this company with this other guy. And then shortly after we set it up, the Australian arm got a request from Air New Zealand, the chief of Air New Zealand, who's at that time was a man called Rob Fife. And he wanted to run a 2-day personal development program through the entire organization. That's like 12,000 people. And like at the same time that I've basically been preparing myself to teach this curriculum, here comes our first client. And I ended up spending the next 2 years teaching this course to Air New Zealand staff across the country and conference centres and hotels and then also helping to teach a whole bunch of their people internally to facilitate the workshop. So for me, it was like an apprenticeship and really teaching personal development in a professional context, which was just fabulous. It's like the universe conspired to support me. It was amazing.
It seemed that the universe have been onto you, well, from an early from earlier on. So um, oh, a lot of wonderful things in that sharing. So obviously the mental fitness again, that all the work you've done and all the reading and somebody leaving all this material for you that ended up in an attic and then suddenly you're getting onto it. Obviously, whether you probably didn't use that language back then, I didn't either, mental fitness, but it actually helped build your mental fitness to then say yes to these things too. get engaged with this new opportunity, and then suddenly this massive opportunity to teach these things, and it's like, okay, shall I keep walking into the ocean and drown, or shall I just get on stage and do this stuff? And you had the mental fitness to do that. And another thing in your story also, I want to unpack here as well very quickly, is because I can relate to it myself. I failed badly at school, and not necessarily because I was stupid necessarily, and the same with you. It's just that none of us had the mental fitness to deal with the challenges and really having the motivation to study, because we didn't
That-
have the clarity, we didn't have the purpose. And then you went and picked some apples, and I went traveling and you went traveling, and that unraveled that. And then when you got back to studying, I didn't do any formal study, but I did a lot of personal growth studying and did really well in that because again, now I knew why I was doing it. Uh,
Yes.
and then the mental fitness was there, not because I don't think for you going in and studying at that level you did was particularly easy, but you had the mental fitness to stick with it.
Keep going. That's
Yeah.
right.
And then you threw also parenting in there, and oh man, does that take mental fitness? My wife and I, we're teaching a parenting course at the moment, a 6 week course at the moment, and man, it's a challenging, and it was challenging for me as well, and definitely mental fitness is required for that. So by the sound of it, I know that you will have plenty of more stories. Um, but maybe I'll bring you back at some point and share some more stories with us. What I would like to get to is for you to share, which you already have actually, but maybe elaborate a little bit on some tools. You had the book there, on John Kehoe, and meditation, finding a mentor, and that. Are there any other, either specific or not so specific, things that you have embraced anywhere along this journey that you think our audience could inspire our audience to look at ways that they could do something similar, or the same?
I guess the thing that comes to mind in a lot of the workshops that I'm teaching now, so this company that I have now, moving on from Pacific Institute, Ian, my colleague, and I set up a New Zealand company called Innovate. And as I say, we teach all kinds of ideas and tools that are based in this high performance cognitive psychology and, work in lots of different industries. When it comes to stress reduction, and I think about taking it right back to my childhood and my father suffering from a nervous breakdown, looking at that and trying to work it out, even as a little kid, how this could happen to somebody. The stresses on the outside cause so much pressure on the inside that the nervous system just essentially it just gets fried. So you have burnout, you have fatigue, you have burnout, and lots of symptoms that are related to the pressures that we're under. So, I have a workshop called Performance Under Pressure, and I can see from my childhood, the ideas that sort of emerged from there have sort of come right through into what I'm trying to get across now, and I certainly use it in my own personal life and professional life of how to perform under pressure. So, one of the tools that we teach, and I could happy to pass over now, is consider the idea that as we're moving through our daily experience, just doing what we do, often you'll notice that there's a contrast between how things should be on the inside, how I want them to be, and what I'm observing on the outside.
Mm,
And when there's a mismatch between these two pictures, that creates a dissonance. The word is dissonance, but to me, it's like an internal resistance
mm,
to the stuff that's happening out there. You know, I'll say to people, you're already overloaded at work, say, and someone comes to you and says, "Oh, and by the way, before you finish up, can you do this, this, and this?" And on the inside, you feel yourself just kind of like, oh, and that sort of the blood pressure rises, and that resistance, it's like, how can they expect that of me? That internal resistance, it creates a stress response. All the stress chemicals flooding through, and the physical body is responding. As I say, the blood pressure goes up, and you're feeling that pressure. So the sort of key foundation ideas in a lot of the workshops I teach, and I also try to get it across to young people in high school seminars, is that as we're living these two worlds, the internal world and the outside world at the same time, and you're feeling that resistance, you don't like what you're seeing, it shouldn't be like that, and I don't want it to be like that. That internal resistance, the antidote when you're looking at trying to reduce the stress with their experience, the antidote of resistance is acceptance. It's
Mm,
allowing, right? So more and more and more, and this is what I think I discovered when I was traveling, is when you find in these situations where the outside doesn't match how they should be, the bus doesn't turn up, you can get really angry about that. Or you can, as quickly as possible, try to find a place of acceptance with it. It's
mm,
like, okay, I'll just lie down, like you said in your story, you know. Um, so much in modern day living today, in the world today, and what young people are facing, but all of us really, is that we're trying to create our lives in the way that we want them, but in many ways they don't work out how we want them to be.
mm,
And so there's this way of trying to move through those situations with a little bit more ease, is just more and more and more trying to find a place of acceptance with those situations, especially when they're outside of our control, things that happen to us that are outside of control. I think as growing up, when you're a child and growing up, and these things are happening to your parents or your family, you don't have the control in those situations. You just have to go along with it. And I think if I had found a place of acceptance with that a little bit more earlier and had the tools
mm,
to be able to find a place of acceptance with that, I might have been able to move through those situations with a bit more ease, really. And so that's what I teach to people. I say, when you can get really specific with this stuff. You've got a meeting on a Tuesday morning, and every meeting, you go into that meeting feeling intimidated. It's really stressful. 30 minutes on a Tuesday. If you've got these tools where you can start to activate deliberate self-talk scripts, I call them acceptance scripts, to be able to set it up ahead of time, then as you're starting to think about this way and actually try to access that, allowing that acceptance of the situation, you'll start to move through those situations with just that a little bit more ease. And that's really what we're after, so that the nervous system doesn't respond
mm,
to the thinking. Instead of a stress response, you get a relaxation response. And that's what we're after. Just moving through daily
mm,
experience with a bit more ease, finding
mm,
those little scripts.
mm. Great advice, Patrick. Great advice. Acceptance, yeah. And I think for me, an important part to mention in this, because when I talk to people about that, then I will often get the pushback of people saying, Well, I don't want to, because what is happening is not okay. Like the situation needs to change." And I mean, I have a response to that, but this is your floor today. So, what is your response when when people say that?
So when people say, but if I just don't do anything, then the situation doesn't change. What,
Mm,
what, so when I'm talking about acceptance scripts, what I'm saying is that we're not giving up, right?
mm,
What we're doing for now is allowing that situation to be as it is,
mm,
and on the inside, being able to find a place of acceptance with it. So what will happen is, as we start to move through these experiences, that as you're observing them and you don't like them and they shouldn't be like that, as I say, it's not giving up, but as I'm holding this acceptance of allowing,
mm,
what can happen is you can start to notice that you're able to access a type of thinking
mm,
that might actually allow you to solve the problem or actually take action to make it or improve it in some way.
mm,
Because while we're in the resistance, the stress response fires off. It shuts down any form of creativity, any form of problem solving, any form of thinking or mental fitness to be able to actually improve the situation. While we're in the stress response, we stay in that stress response and brain just shuts down.
mm, mm,
So by finding a place of acceptance in those situations, little by little by little, we can start to find ourselves actually in the relaxation response, starting to look at opportunities or ways or creativity that actually helps to improve the situation.
mm,
But we won't get there while we're in that stress response.
mm.
So it's the first step is to be able to find a place of acceptance. And then through that, then the problem solving and the creativity can start to move us through those. And then hopefully, and as we move through them and into them, we're able to find those solutions that help to improve them.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I think that that's really important, and that's definitely my experience. So for me, again, when we accept, it doesn't mean that we accept the situation. What we're accepting is that this is happening, and we stop resisting that. So my little
Exactly.
drawing I will often do is, and big arrow up on the board, and I will say emotion. So when the emotion goes up, there's a big arrow on the other side going down, and that says common sense. So when emotion goes up, common sense goes down. And that's
Yes,
exactly what you said, just in different language. So it's not that we should accept everything that is happening, but when we can release that tension and we can get a clearer mind, then we can go, there's no point in being upset about the bus, and there's nothing I can do about getting the bus here.
anyway.
Whereas there are other situations where I don't like this situation, so I can release that tension. But actually, I want to do something about this situation and then come at it from a clarity, from a positive viewpoint. And all of this requires mental fitness. This whole process of acceptance, because our mind naturally, for most of us, unfortunately, goes into resistance because we don't have the mental fitness to accept. Does that, is that,
That's it.
does that,
Yeah, absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm saying. And it doesn't matter, what we say to ourselves in that moment to be able to find the emotion on the inside. That's what we're after.
mm,
So, I had a wonderful example of from a midwife I was working with in Hutt Hospital who would say to herself, uh, when especially, when everything goes to custard and everyone's really stressed, she'll say to herself, tits and teeth, right? Tits and teeth. And everyone's like, what? What does that mean? She said, well, I come from a professional dancing background. And when you're dancing and, someone missteps or your partner missteps and it all goes to custard, you get trained to basically take a deep breath, put your chest out and keep smiling. Right. So she says tits and teeth, chest out, keep smiling. She's taken that from her dancing background and she's put it into her work context. And
mm,
when, again, those situations that we don't like and they shouldn't be going through change and so on, that's the thing that she says to herself. So it doesn't matter what it says. It's really about what you can use to activate, as you say, the emotion of
mm,
acceptance internally. And then from that place, you can find the tools to be able to move through those situations. And taking action always is going to make us feel better.
mm, eh,
But as you say, taking action from a place of clarity.
mm. Big difference. So it's in the first instance, it's not action, it's reaction. And then when
Yes,
we
exactly.
create what I love to call the gap, which is really what the acceptance is. And then after that gap, then we can move into action, which is very different from reaction. And
Yes.
we could keep having another couple of hours conversation about this because we're both excited about this. I can see that. But we need to bring this to an end today, unfortunately. So the last thing I want to finish with all my guests is a story of transformation. And that's a bit tricky here again because you've already shared two or three of those. But maybe there is another, and it could be something from way back in your life, it can be something just 3 days ago, something where you experience a sense of transformation, whatever that means to you, that you're happy to share. Have you got another transformation story there for us?
I think something that I alluded to through, sort of observing my own life experience and how things show up, like I said, the mentors showed up in the form of my boss and being able to kind of hear this inner guidance
Mm,
and adhere to the inner guidance.
mm,
I guess as I witness my own life, there's two things that are going on at the same time. There's my mind with my mental fitness, trying to create the life that I want,
mm,
right? And simultaneously, there's another aspect of myself, a deeper aspect. People call it your higher self or your soul, which is also operating within you and sending you little messages to say, okay, try this, try that. So for me, in terms of my own personal philosophy, I think when you meditate, uh, the inner transformation comes through meditation.
mm,
So what it means is you quieten the mind, and when you quieten the mind, you're able to find a level of consciousness where an intelligence exists, and that intelligence is really your higher self,
mm,
and it comes from a place of pure positive energy of love. And whenever you're operating in your daily experience out of love, out of kindness, out of service, you're living your higher self, your soul um, um, attributes.
mm,
And I think the biggest transformation for me is really living my entire life in service, because what it does is it reduces a huge amount of stress, which I saw through my early childhood. But also it adds a whole dimension of meaning and purpose that makes life uh, so fulfilling and so wonderful that you just want to keep giving.
mm,
I discovered, I remember early on learning that the ancient Greeks had a model for happiness, and they used this kind of four levels of happiness model, where they said that when you think about happiness, the things that make us happy in life, H1, happiness level one, is about attainment, which means you get stuff. You buy a new outfit, or you get a new car or something like that. And it makes us feel happy. So we kind of have this level of happiness when we attain something. And the thing is, it doesn't really last long. Like you kind of always want to have the new outfit, the next thing, the new car, and so on. It's like it doesn't last.
mm,
And also, it's out of our control. Sometimes we can't actually get the stuff we want.
mm,
And then they talk about the happiness level two, which is achievement. And again, trying to achieve things. I know, looking through my life, I was so happy when I achieved my goal of getting a psychology degree, and then again, going on and getting a master's in education. Achievement made me feel happy. But then they talk about happiness level three, which is about giving, and happiness level four, which is about service. And
mm,
it kind of turns it around, because what I noticed as I started to find myself, particularly with parenting in H3, I was giving of myself, my time, my love, my energy to the raising of children.
mm,
I felt happy doing that.
mm,
And it stuck around, and it was within my control how much I could give.
mm,
And then with my work, and working, trying to give and teach and educate people, and that's a whole nother level of happiness, is service in that. So the thing about H3 and H4 is that we can actually control it, and it lasts a lot longer. And so what I would say, sort of eventually start to finish up, is that if people can find themselves or work them to a place where they can actually get themselves into a level of giving and service. And that in many ways comes from this other aspect of yourself, your higher self. If you can allow the space to be able to bring through your calling and who you really are, life gets a lot easier and it also feels a lot better.
Mm,
I'll leave you
mm,
with that.
mm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Um, and what a transformation again into that. I don't know what we should call it, next level, or like it's into that, into the soul, into the higher self, or there are many other words for that place, and it truly is a beautiful thing. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and hopefully that can be inspiring to some of the people listening to this. It's like, okay, so there is more to life than just this physical aspect of showing up and getting the car and a new outfit and achieving this and making this amount of money and have a successful business and all good stuff. But if we want lasting happiness, and I can totally testify to that in my own life, it does not come from age one and age two. It comes from age three and four. And
Exactly.
ideally, if we can do both,
Yeah.
which actually in a roundabout way, I think often they possibly, in my experience, tend to come together.
Yes, they all happen. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the beauty of it.
that's the beauty of it.
But
Um,
to hold your focus more and more on H3 and H4.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Patrick, so much for coming along, and I will make sure to put links into the resources you talked about, and I also know you have some other resources on your website. So at innovate.co, I will pop that in, and I noticed that there's a new self-care self-study course there that people can get. So make sure to put all that in there because I believe self-care is it's a good thing. It's not being selfish. It is looking after yourself so you can be more in age three and four for other people.
Exactly.
So,
Thank you.
thank you, Patrick, for being here. Thank you to our audience for being with us today, and wishing you all a happy day from here on. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success. If you have stories of how mental fitness has benefited you that you are happy to share, go to my website, mikael.nz, click on podcast and fill in the guest application form. If you want direct support from me utilizing my 40 years of mental fitness learning and practice, email me at coach@mikael.nz or message me on LinkedIn. Any feedback, review, share, follow, like, or any other good stuff is, of course, appreciated. Thank you for listening to Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success podcast. I'm your host, Mikael Nelson.